Have you ever had a weekend with no plans, and instead of feeling relaxed, you just crash? I'm talking here about full body inertia, mental static, emotional dread. You wake up with no urgency, no meetings, no emails, and instead of enjoying the break, a weight starts to settle on your chest. You pace the house, you scroll endlessly, you feel irritable for no reason. And then your brain starts whispering, "You're not doing enough. You're wasting time. Your life is going nowhere." What starts as a pause turns into a spiral. You begin inventorying your entire existence, your job, your friends, your love life, your goals, and the conclusion you reach, you're not measuring up. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist, and today we're going to talk about a phenomenon that hits many neurodivergents hard: why moments of rest can trigger chronic dissatisfaction, depressive crashes, and a relentless sense that life is missing something. Let's start with what I call the inventory. It usually hits in moments of pause, after a long work week, on a quiet weekend, or during what might be a peaceful vacation. You finally stop, there's nothing demanding your attention, no looming deadlines, no urgent texts, nothing to keep you preoccupied. And then, bam, out of nowhere, unease. Your thoughts turn inward, and not in a calm, reflective way, but like your brain is trying to audit your entire life. You start scanning for what's wrong. You make a mental list. I'm not successful enough. I don't have solid friendships. I'm lonely. I'm not passionate about anything. I haven't achieved my dreams. I'm wasting my life. You search for evidence to confirm a feeling you don't understand. And because the brain is excellent at pattern finding, it offers up examples. It connects the dots in a way that feels devastatingly logical. Here's the trickiest part. Some of the things on your list might actually be true. Maybe you are craving more connection. Maybe your job is unfulfilling. These are valid needs. But, and this is the key, just hours ago or a day prior, you weren't feeling this way. You were doing okay. You had energy, maybe even joy. You were laughing at a video, planning dinner, sending memes to friends. The emotional drop came after the stimulation stopped. So what if it's not that your life suddenly became unworthy, but that your brain's chemical balance shifted? What if the emotional crash came first, and the inventory is just your mind's way of rationalizing it? For many neurodivergents, that's exactly what's happening. The inventory isn't a sign that your life is broken. It's a sign that you're experiencing dopamine dysregulation. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter responsible for pleasure, motivation, and our sense of reward. It plays a huge role in our ability to initiate tasks, feel satisfaction from completing them, and even experience joy in everyday activities. When dopamine levels are low, everything can feel flat, frustrating, or meaningless. Now, for autistics and ADHDers, dopamine doesn't always flow the way it's supposed to. There's growing evidence that both neurotypes can experience chronic dopamine deficiency. In plain terms, our brains are often short on the very chemical that gives life its sparkle. This deficiency might not be obvious when we're busy, when we're chasing goals, or when we're flooded with stimulation. That's because many neurodivergents are excellent at finding ways to farm dopamine through projects, hyperfocus, multitasking, even risk-taking, or creative bursts. But when the input stops, when the stimulation fades, that's when the crash happens. The sudden withdrawal of dopamine can feel like a rug being pulled out from under you. And because this dip is neurological, it can feel inexplicable. You might think, I should be fine, nothing bad has happened. Why do I feel so off? And in that vulnerable state, your brain starts trying to make sense of it. Hence the inventory. Hence the spiral. What's really happening is chemical, but it feels existential. So what do we do if our dopamine is low? Many of us, especially if we're neurodivergent, find ways to self-medicate. We may not even realize we're doing it, but over time, we learn to chase stimulation to feel okay. This can become a kind of unconscious survival strategy. We find behaviors or activities that give us a dopamine hit, and we return to them again and again. Some of these are obvious: social media scrolling, gaming, shopping, binge watching, eating sugar, drinking coffee. Others might be more socially acceptable, like throwing ourselves into work, planning a million projects, or exercising intensely. I call this pattern dopamine farming, although I've also heard it referred to as dopamine mining. It's the process of continually seeking out tiny hits of stimulation, consciously or not, to offset the dullness, flatness, or emotional pain that comes from dysregulation. And it's important to know this isn't laziness, weakness, or poor discipline. It's a neurochemical strategy. It's how we cope. But here's the challenge. Not all dopamine farming is created equal. Some activities are healthy in moderation, like movement, creativity, or social connection, but others can become compulsive. They can veer into territory that feels out of control. Risky behaviors, addictions, avoidance spirals. It's a short-term fix that often leads to longer-term consequences. The irony: the more we farm dopamine, the more tolerance we can build. What once gave us a buzz becomes background noise. We need more. We crave novelty. We switch from one stimulant to another. And when nothing is working, when we can't find the hit, we crash hard. That crash can look like fatigue, irritability, anxiety, restlessness, or even depression. And in that low, our brain may kick off another inventory. The loop continues. To manage dopamine dysregulation, many neurodivergents develop strategies. There are two that I'll explain here. The many mountains approach is like being a dopamine mountaineer. You're always eyeing the next peak, and once you've summited one goal, whether it's finishing a big project, launching a new idea, or mastering a new hobby, you're already scanning for the next challenge. Each mountain offers a fresh hit of novelty, urgency, and reward. We're not trying to reach a destination, we're trying to stay in motion. The pursuit itself becomes the fix. Then there's the many irons approach. Imagine a blacksmith's forge. Instead of one project or task, you've got 5, 6, maybe 10 irons in the fire. You keep moving between them, never letting anyone cool down completely. This juggling act is about maintaining stimulation. None of these tasks on their own may be engaging enough, but together they keep your brain lit up. But here's the paradox. Both of these strategies work to a degree. They can keep us afloat, engaged, even energized, but they're also exhausting. Still, for many of us, this lifestyle feels preferable to the alternative: the void, the lull, the crash. That's the rub. We'd rather be overstimulated than understimulated because we know what the crash feels like. We know how fast it can spiral, so we stay busy, we chase, we climb, we keep throwing more irons in the fire. And if this resonates, I want you to know there's nothing wrong with needing stimulation, but there's a difference between moving toward meaning and fleeing from emptiness. And that's a balance worth exploring. Let's talk about one of the more socially sanctioned forms of dopamine farming: workaholism. For many neurodivergents, especially ADHDers and autistics with strong internal critics or perfectionist traits, work can become the primary source of stimulation, identity, and self-worth. It offers structure, novelty, deadlines, feedback, everything a dopamine-starved brain might crave. And unlike other behaviors, it's often rewarded. Promotions, praise, financial gain, they all reinforce the cycle. But there's a shadow side. Workaholism can lead to difficulty stopping, to feeling anxious on weekends. It's checking emails in bed. It's thinking, I'll rest after this project, and then immediately starting another. It's saying yes to every opportunity, every request, every side hustle, because the stillness is unbearable. And here's where it gets more complex. For some neurodivergents, the taskmaster voice, the internal critic, joins the party. It tells us that if we're not constantly producing, we're lazy, useless, failing. This can be especially true for those of us who've been praised only for performance or who've survived environments where rest was unsafe or unacceptable. And while this kind of overfunctioning might look impressive from the outside, internally, it's often driven by fear. Fear of stillness, fear of worthlessness, fear of facing the crash. The challenge is recognizing when our passion has tipped into compulsion, when our career has become our only lifeline, and finding ways to reclaim balance, not by abandoning stimulation altogether, but by diversifying where it comes from. So what happens when the dopamine supply runs out? When we've been running on overdrive, juggling tasks, climbing mountains, obsessing over projects, and suddenly the stimulation stops, we crash. This crash is a full body, full brain shutdown. Fatigue, irritability, anxiety, brain fog, a sense of emptiness or despair. Some describe it as hitting a wall. I refer to it as the rubber band effect. After being stretched to your limit, you snap back hard in the other direction. And this crash can feel existential. You start asking big, scary questions. What's the point? Why do I feel like this? Is my life even going anywhere? You might find yourself stuck in bed, unable to start anything. The tasks you put off while you were hustling now loom large. And the more you can't move, the more guilty and ashamed you feel. I've referred to this as the post-work plunge or the weekend woes. It happens when you've been functioning, perhaps even over-functioning throughout the week. You've used up every drop of executive function to stay productive, mask your distress, and meet expectations. And then the weekend arrives. No structure, no stimulation, nothing to chase, and your brain bottoms out. You may try to recover by dopamine farming, binge watching shows, eating junk food, scrolling endlessly. But these don't satisfy. In fact, they often make you feel worse, because what you're really experiencing isn't so much boredom as it is neurochemical withdrawal. The worst part is you might misinterpret this crash as a personal failing. You think, I'm lazy, I'm unmotivated, I'm a mess. When in reality, you're burnt out. Your system is depleted. You've been running a neurological marathon with no rest stops. And if you've tied your self-worth to your productivity, as many neurodivergents have, this crash can feel like losing your identity. That's why it's so important to name it, to recognize that this isn't a mood, but a biological pattern, a result of dopamine dysregulation. And with that awareness, you can begin to respond differently. Dopamine crashes can be made even worse by perseveration, something that's common among neurodivergents. It's when your brain grabs onto a thought or a series of thoughts and won't let go. You ruminate, you loop, you spiral, and the more you try to redirect, the louder the thought gets. Perseveration seems like you're chewing on a problem because you want to solve it, but actually it's being stuck. It's your brain pulling you back into the same emotional rabbit hole, even when you know it's unhelpful, even when you want to think about something else. When you combine this with dopamine dysregulation, the effect can be brutal. Here's how it often plays out. You hit a quiet moment of low stimulation, say a quiet evening or a slow weekend. Your dopamine dips, you feel restless, agitated, or flat. Your brain starts to search for a reason. It lands on a fear, a regret, or a worry, and then it perseverates. You start thinking, I'm failing at life. And instead of letting it pass, your brain keeps revisiting the idea, amplifying the narrative. This is why so many neurodivergents dread unstructured free time, because they know without something external to latch onto, their brain will turn inward. And often it turns inward with a magnifying glass and a sledgehammer. Your thoughts feel true, they feel urgent, but what's really happening again is a chemical state triggering a cognitive pattern. Your brain is dysregulated and it's using perseveration to try to make sense of it. This is why managing stimulation and being mindful of downtime involves creating supportive rests. It's about having just enough structure, novelty, or connection to buffer the drop. You keep your brain from defaulting to the deepest, darkest tab in the browser of your mind. And when perseveration hits, the goal isn't to force yourself out of it, it's to recognize it for what it is, a symptom, not a truth, not a prophecy, just your brain doing what it does when it's low on fuel. So what do we do about all of this? If you've recognized yourself in any of these patterns, dopamine farming, workaholism, crashing, perseveration, I want to start by saying you're not broken, you're not weak, You're navigating a neurobiological reality, and that means the solution isn't just try harder or think more positively. It's about supporting your brain where it is. Let's talk about some strategies that can help. Recognize the pattern. The first step is awareness. Notice when the crash hits. Track when you start to inventory your life or spiral into dissatisfaction. Ask yourself, what just changed? Did stimulation drop? Did I have a big week? Am I suddenly underoccupied? Naming the pattern can help you step outside of it and reduce the shame. Reframe the narrative. When you find yourself in a spiral, remember this might be a chemical state, not an existential one. That doesn't mean your concerns aren't valid, but the intensity of the emotion might be magnified by dysregulation. Can you hold space for your feelings without letting them define your identity? Schedule balanced downtime. Free time doesn't have to be empty time. Try building in light structure. A walk, a call with a friend, a hobby that offers a bit of challenge or novelty. For me, weekends used to be a crash zone. Now I intentionally mix low-key stimulation, like video games, with at least 1 or 2 social engagements. It helps me feel connected and grounded. Set limits on work. If you tend to overfunction through work, try setting firm boundaries. I no longer work past certain hours or on weekends. It was hard at first, but it taught me that I can rest and still be valuable. That rest isn't the opposite of productivity, it's what makes sustainable productivity possible. Use the many mountains, many irons strategically. Having multiple interests or projects can be a strength, but be intentional. Which ones energize you? Which ones are compulsive? Which ones actually nourish your well-being? Create space for passion without letting it become pressure. Consider medical support. For some, stimulant medication can make a significant difference. Many ADHDers, for example, report improved focus, mood regulation, and reduced crash intensity with proper support. If this resonates, speak to a doctor or psychiatrist who understands neurodivergence. Mindfulness and self-compassion. Practices that build awareness, like journaling, therapy, or mindfulness, can help you catch perseveration before it spirals. And when the crash hits, offer yourself kindness. You're not lazy, you're navigating a complex brain in a world that often doesn't accommodate it. There's no cure for dopamine dysregulation, but there is understanding, support, and strategy. You can create a rhythm that works for you. One that allows for stimulation and rest, for effort and ease. And maybe most importantly, one that doesn't require you to hustle endlessly to feel worthy. If any part of today's video hit home for you, if you felt that emptiness after the high, that need to always be doing, or that crash when the doing stops, I want you to hear this. There is a name for what you're experiencing. Dopamine dysregulation isn't your fault. It's not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. And while it can be incredibly challenging, there's always room for compassion, for change, room to write a different narrative about what rest, meaning, and balance look like. We don't have to live in a constant state of chase. We don't have to prove our worth through productivity. We don't have to fear the quiet. There is a middle ground, a life where stimulation and stillness can coexist, where we can honor our need for novelty without burning out, where we can rest without crashing. If you're navigating these waters too, know that I'm right here with you. I've lived it, and I continue to live through it. If you found this video helpful, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with anyone you think might benefit from my content. And feel free to drop a comment. What does your crash look like? What helps you manage your dopamine rhythm? I'd love to hear about your experiences. Until next time, be kind to your brain and gentle with your heart. Bye for now.